Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, or good afternoon, depends on where you're joining from. I am Belén Gallego, CEO of ATA Insights, and I am joining from Pontevedra in Spain today. And I have with me, as you know, this has been one of my dreams, really, to interview some of the people that inspire in our dear industry. And today with us is a person that I hadn't actually met before, but has surprised me every step of the way for everything he's accomplished. And that would be Christopher Johnson. Christopher, just tell us where you're joining from today. Where are you located today?
Belen, thank you for the nice introduction. I'm joining you from Columbus, Ohio. It's morning time here for us, so thanks for the nice introduction.
Thank you very much, Chris. So Chris is joining from Ohio, and as you know, we've actually had people in this series, in the Leader series from Norway. We had people joining from Dubai. We'll have someone also joining from India. And actually, this is a very, very global series. As you can see today with us, we've got someone that represents a bit the American side of things. Because Chris works for American Electric Power, which is one of the utilities, and he is going to be telling us today how that works and how they're going into the future. So let me take the screen away so that I can actually see my notes. So let me tell you about Chris Johnson. He's one of the minds behind the regeneration and with the re in generation, standing for renewable energy, of this utility, American Electric Power. And if you're not familiar with the system in the US, do not worry, we're going to clarify how it all works. But essentially, AEP is a public utility. That means that the prices of electricity and the operation are set by the government. So not everything is sort of like privately owned in the US and the energy markets either. So they deliver electricity to more than 5 million customers in 11 states. Most of AEP assets up to time were called generation, but things are quickly changing, of course, as you know. And we're going to be looking into, how is AEP looking into the future, AEP, sorry. And just a reminder that this is part of the skills development program for renewable energy professionals. You know that we look into a lot of topics, we look into technology, financing, but we believe also that looking into the leaders of our industry is a very huge piece, an important piece of the puzzle to understand, where we should be going. So first of all, welcome, Chris, and thank you for being here today. And to start, can you tell us, please, how public utilities work in the US, particularly how AEP works, so that we can understand, because there are people joining from everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, thank you. So just a little bit of a reminder, American Electric Power, we operate in 11 states. Most of those states are vertically integrated states. And let me pause a moment and I'll explain what that is. When we say vertically integrated, we really mean that we have a duty to serve all customers within our footprint from a generation, transmission, and distribution perspective. So it's vertically integrated from generating the electrons to transporting the electrons to getting the electrons to people's homes. Now, just to let you know that not every state that AEP operates in is vertically integrated. Most of the states are, with the exception of Texas and Ohio. The difference in those states is that the generation portion of the vertically integrated stack is actually a competitive component of the business. So that's kind of a really high level view of what we mean by vertically integrated.
And what do you do at AEP today?
Yeah, I have the pleasure to act as the lead of AEP's innovation program. Which has been great for me, and it's been really awesome for the company. There's a lot of folks that are pretty excited about what we're doing. But how I generally describe what we do, we're a startup company within a large corporation that starts up startup companies, which is really foreign to the energy landscape, and particularly the energy landscape in the United States. So it's been a lot of fun.
And I mean, your job sounds like a dream job. I'm sure that to me and to everyone out there, the minute you mention innovation and changing things is like amazing, but it wasn't always like this. And I think this is a good point that people are going to see through the interview, So I just want to take you back to the beginning, and I wanted to hear about sort of like how did it all start? And it starts obviously with your family, and they worked at the railroad, where you also worked from a very young age. And so I am interested to hear, exactly what did you do and how that influenced your future.
Yeah, both my parents really started out at the front line in the positions that they had at the railroads here in the United States. Actually, what we call short line railroads, they're small railroads, so not the ones that span across the country, but just the small ones. And they had the opportunity to grow from the front line and move up into leadership positions. But I think what you're asking, Belen, is, how did it sort of start for me? Because they had that opportunity, and really from a young age, from my standpoint, really from the age of 9, I started to go to work with my parents. I kind of joke with people and say that I did my first career in the railroad industry, because literally from the age of 9 all the way up through university, summertime, snow days, weekends, holidays, I went to the railroad with my parents. I ran locomotives, I switched cars, I did track work. I had the opportunity to really experience industry from a really young age and appreciate what customer service was and what all this big machinery was. And it was fascinating. And my wife says that I didn't have a childhood, and I tell her that I can't imagine growing up any other way, because it was just so fantastic.
Okay, it's actually a great story, but this is the thing. You love the railroads, you worked there for years with your parents, but when it came to decide a career, you decided not to go in that direction. In fact, it was kind of hard for you to decide what to do. So tell us about those early years and how you decided to go eventually into engineer.
Yeah, all of my family works for the railroad. My mom, my dad, my uncles, like the whole family worked for the railroad. So it was like, hey, this is your easy button to go work for the railroad. I'm like, I do not want to go work for the railroad. I've had enough of this, 10 years of doing that. And I had seen enough, and I really wanted to go and experience new challenges. Growing up, I wanted to be a doctor, but after some soul searching, I didn't think I quite had it cut out for myself to do the studying to be a doctor. So I actually went to university to study safety, health, and occupational management and really environmental management, and ended up with an environmental engineering degree, which was fantastic. And really during that time, it was challenging for me. The first 2 years, I went down the path of pretty solidly wanting to do the safety and health thing. And partway through my college career, I went back to wanting to be a doctor. And I applied to medical school and got in at The Ohio State University, and moved from the city that I was going to university in to Columbus, Ohio. And at that point, I hadn't told my parents. And when I did tell them that I was moving to Columbus and I was going to med school, they said, no, we're not supporting you doing that. That's a big bet. And I did it anyway. I went and did it. And I was paying all my own bills, and it was challenging. So I had to get a job, and I ended up getting 3 jobs. One of them ended up really turning into a pretty cool business that I started with a coworker, remodeling homes and townhomes and apartments. And the long story short is, I was working more than I was going to school at the end of the day. But the experience of starting up that company and the successes and the failures associated with it, even though at the end of the day it ended up being a huge success, was great for me.
And so that guys, you can see that he's moving around, right? So Chris, in the prep calls, one of the things he said that completely self-describes him is he said, I have a problem with sitting still. I have to be constantly learning. And that's, you will see through the interview, that is totally the truth. In the next period, actually, Chris, you joined the Memorial Institute and you learned a lot there. So tell us briefly about this part of your life. How was it like being there?
Yeah, so just to continue the story, when I set up this company in Columbus doing this remodeling work, after about a year or two, I realized after working 12 and 16 hours a day, 6-7 days a week, that, you know, I was making an impact, but it wasn't quite the impact that I wanted to make with the rest of my life. So I ended up actually selling the business off, and I went back to the original university that I was going to, and re-picked back up where I left off with my environmental engineering focus. And during that time, I also got the opportunity to work for Battelle Memorial Institute. And the Battelle Memorial Institute is a very large R&D company that does technology discovery and development across many, many domains. And when I went back to school, I got the opportunity to do a co-op at the Battelle Memorial Institute for a summer. It was only supposed to be for a summer, but that summer turned into a 2-year engagement with them, where during the school year, I would drive 2 hours up north to go to school, and then the next day, 2 hours back south to go work at Battelle, and back and forth for 2 years straight. It was a challenge, but it was worth it. The time that I spent at Battelle, being exposed to new technologies and the new ways of the world, and really what science and technology could do for humanity, it was pivotal for me. It really showed me what the options in life were, and it was great.
And then you started working in AEP, but you could have picked an office job. You know, you could have just like done a run-of-the-mill. You know, millions of jobs are there like that, but you didn't want to do that. You went straight to the coal plants, and the interesting thing is you found it really familiar. So you will tell us about that. And then you discovered that something quite wasn't right. Tell us about that sort of first years or first months, if you like, in AEP.
Yeah, so when I finished at university and I graduated, I went to the leadership team at Battelle Memorial Institute and said, hey, I'd really love to stay working here. You know, I want to start my career here. And they said, we love you working here, but we really don't have an opportunity for you, but you can stay on as a co-op. And I'm like, I really need to start my career. And at that point, I decided to start the search for a career. And I searched many jobs around Columbus, Ohio. I had offers to work for some boutique consulting firms and some large engineering firms. And then I went for this interview at American Electric Power at a really small coal-fired power plant just south of Columbus, Ohio, called Pickway Plant. It's not there anymore today. And when I walked into this place, and mind you, the job that I had put in for wasn't an engineering job or a desk job. It was a union worker job. It was a frontline job. When I walked into the place, it reminded me of my childhood. It really reminded me of all the times that I spent with my parents at the railroad working. It was the same vintage of equipment. The culture was the same, and it just felt like home. It felt like the right place. And when I really analyzed the situation about AEP, yeah, I'm starting at the front line, but look at how big of a company this is and how much there is to learn versus just kind of doing the consulting grind thing. And I went for it. You know, it was probably a really untraditional decision, but to, instead of taking an engineer job, go to be a union guy. But I learned so much during that time working at the plant, and I wouldn't change it for anything. But you're right. During that period, it really got me started my curiosity about why are we still producing energy the way that we have for a really long time. And why can't we change that? After being inspired of working at Battelle and seeing what the future looks like, I, kind of went back in time at this facility and really started asking, why this? Why not more?
Why not more? I love that. And during our chats before, you said to me, making decisions that the industry currently is making decisions based on the past that will not help us for the future. We need to figure out a path and go forward. So what you saw was a very large company that kept on sort of the inertia of that old business model. And it was a company with a lot of resources, but it had no attitude or interest in innovating, correct?
Yeah, here's the scenario. Here in the US, the energy industry, it's 120 years old. And over that 120 years, we have basically been using the same technology and the same business model, which is great. We've been very successful, not just American Electric Power, but all of the companies across the US, very successful. We have a culture that has a lineage within it that, their grandpas and their fathers, and now they work at the generating facilities or out on the transmission lines or in the distribution lines. And that's not the case in all circumstances, but we have a lineage of pride for the industry. Now, you and I know this, and some of the audience knows this. Technology, new business models, and customer perception is changing. The way we think about things today, and especially when we look to the future, when the consumers of tomorrow, when we ask them how they think about their energy company, they don't tell us a story about 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. They tell us a story and paint a picture about something that is completely different than what we have today. And what I guess the message I'm trying to say is that while we have a culture that is rooted in the past because we've been so successful, and that is a good thing, we also need to be curious about what the future looks like, so that culture and all of the workforce in American Electric Power and across the industry can lead us into the future instead of repeating the past. And that's one of the main keystones in what we do, is we try and inspire the thought about what the future is going to look like so we can act towards it.
But obviously, when as a company or as a person, you're building and rallying the support, to make a change in a very sort of old school company, that is really hard. It's a really hard period. It takes a lot of time. And we're talking about a business model that is like the best part of a century old. I'm a startup, I am an entrepreneur, and I see every day how difficult it is to start, when you don't have inertia in the business. So if through this time where you were trying to change the company into a renewable energy company, how did you cope with the stress? I mean, were you finding that people were listening to you within AEP? Was there a willing to change? Were you having pushback? How did it work? And more importantly, how did you keep the faith, and how did you keep going?
Yeah, so if we back up to where I started at the front line, there was about an 18-month or 2-year period where I actually worked at that first job, and after that I got the opportunity to move on and manage the environmental programs at power plants here in the eastern part of our footprint, and started to sort of challenge the norm and progress through that job and transform the way we manage compliance and that, but also landed in a position where the work that we were doing became optimized, and I had idle time, which got me even more curious about the finances and the economics and our position in the industry, and why we weren't leveraging sort of the technologies of tomorrow, why we weren't curious about them. And during that time, I had a mentor that helped me really progress in my career. And I made another job change after the environmental work to our continuous improvement organization, where it was focused on coaching the leaders of the generation side of our business into doing the business of today instead of the business of 30 years ago. And that kind of sounds blunt, but it really was about process organization and optimization of the way we spend money on things. And it was fantastic. But there was a time of unrest for me in that period where it was a lull period where we weren't making progress in my mind. And it was challenging. So.
You came up with a plan though, didn't you?
I did come up with a plan, and the plan really upended the normal business model and the normal value streams of what we currently have today. And that plan really emphasized on the energy company becoming a marketer and distributor of distributed energy resources and creating a platform for those distributed energy resources to be traded across. And during that time, I built a business plan and started pitching it to external parties and to internal parties, until one day I finally got a meeting with one of our high up executives that was in charge of technology. And I pitched him the idea, and he said, "Chris, we've seen bits and pieces of what you've presented before, but never quite how you've presented it." And I remember it was a 45-minute meeting. And at the end of the meeting, he said, "I would love to do what you've presented, but," and here's the big but we're too large of a company with too many executives. We have no budget for that. And I have no team to help you make that real. And at the end of the meeting, I was a little ticked. I was a little ticked off, because at that time we were, I think, the second largest utility energy company in the United States. And we weren't invested in creating the new utility. We weren't invested in innovating, and we were innovating, but we weren't innovating out on the edge. We were innovating in an adjacent space. And I was passionate about getting us out on the edge. So I left the meeting mad, and my position changed. It no longer for me was about the idea that I pitched. It became for me more important to make sure that we organized ourselves as a company and as an industry to look to the future, to invest in the edgy things, not bet the farm on them, but make small bets on those things so that we could inspire our workforce and create the future.
So it was you trying to get all of AEP to go into the future. How long did that take, and how was it?
Yeah, it took a long time. For years, I still gave my pitch, and any opportunity that I could take a credible source that I found from the web or in the news about innovation and technology, I would pitch those things internally, and I would send them to our executives. And I really was the quiet annoyance for quite a few years. Probably frustrating some people, but it turned out okay.
Did it turn out okay? You were nearly 6 years talking about that. How did you manage to stay in AEP and not look elsewhere? It would have been super easy for you to just change jobs into a company, a startup that is innovating. How did you remain sane through this, and why?
Yeah, I told you there was a period of time where it was challenging for me. My wife at that time was back in school, and we weren't able to spend much time together. And I had free time kind of at work, and I had free time at home, and I needed to expel my energy on something. So I decided to do an Ironman. It's something that I had always wanted to do, and I grew up a swimmer, and I really wanted to I needed a challenge. So
You're great.
I spent I spent about a year and a half training for an Ironman.
Okay, so an Ironman, 180 miles on a bike. Am I wrong? Then 5 miles swimming, maybe it's less, 3 miles.
2.3 mile swim, 112-mile bike, and then a marathon.
Right.
26-mile run.
Come on, guys, it's nuts. Like, and you decided. So how were the trainings like, Chris?
The training also helped me. I mean, obviously I got to expel the energy, but the discipline of a year and a half worth of training to culminate in one event was important for me, and actually translated really well into the next phase of my career. But the training was challenging. The race day was
5 a.m. to 5 p.m. training every Saturday, Sunday.
When people say training for an Ironman is like a full-time job, they're not joking. It is nearly a 30 to 40 hour commitment every week.
There you go. And would you do it again?
Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait to do it again. I don't know that I have the time to commit to it right now, because I have a new challenge right now that I'm focused on.
That we're going to talk about right in a minute.
Yeah.
And your timing was pretty good, right?
Yeah,
I show off, but come on.
I finished in 10 hours, 13 minutes. I really, I did quite well.
I don't think I could do the marathon in that time, but anyway, we'll leave that for another time. Okay, so this is what you needed to do to get your head together, because I know it's really, really like difficult time. But why didn't you leave? I mean, why not just look elsewhere? You know, you had a great plan. No one had really put together that plan before. You were looking around and you were thinking, someone's already on top of this, but no one was on top of this. So why not take that advantage and say, that's it? What made you stay?
Yeah, there was a period where I did get frustrated, and I did look to leave, but at the end of the day, it came back to the company and how much I had invested in it and how much I had learned, and I felt indebted to make sure that we got it right. And the guidance that I had gotten from a mentor was that, Chris, if you're not going to do it, who's going to do it? And I guess I made my mind up that I was going to do everything that I could to make sure that we were pushing forward.
So after 6 years of parroting, please listen to me. Finally, someone listens to you. So tell us how it happened, because it must have been the best time of your career. And although, guys, seriously, this man is a very, very busy man, believe me. Yet, I bet you would never change the situation you're in now, even with all the business, to go back to those 6 hard years. So tell us how it all changed really quickly as well.
Yeah, so it was really a story from the past all over again, where I got fascinated about the change. And I still had a day job that I was committed to and responsibilities, but nights, weekends, late hours at night, I developed a plan to build an organization that would incubate the utility of the future, so that we could demonstrate to AEP and to the industry that there's a different way to do it. And really part of my team's mission statement is, a big part of it is to inspire AEP to move forward. And the day that it happened, well, actually it was over the course of a couple of weeks, but how it happened was, a couple of our executives went to Singularity University, and for those of you that know what that is, and came back inspired by them. They were shown what the future looked like and came back and said, oh boy, we need to do something about this. And remembered from all those annoying emails that I had sent probably that, oh, this is the thing that Chris was talking about, which, you know, obviously set me on a course to allow me to build a plan to create an organization to lead me to where I am today.
But no one asked you to build the plan, right?
No, nobody asked me to build the plan. They came back with the need, and I generally knew what we needed to do. So kind of behind the scenes, I picked up the football and I built the plan and scheduled the meeting and presented it. And then the next thing I knew, they said, go run with it. So I did. So
tell us about the project. What did you guys do? It's quite incredible, by the way, guys. Listen to this because it's insane.
So this is 12 months ago. I've officially started this 12 months ago this month. And how it started 12 months ago is we decided we were going to do an open innovation challenge. And we called that open innovation challenge Spark Tank, you know, kind of like Shark Tank, but Spark Tank, it's the energy business after all. We asked all of our employees, we have over 17,000 employees, what cutting edge energy products and services should we deploy to our customers in the future? And they submitted, I don't know, 500 very lengthy proposals. To be honest with you, we thought we were going to get 100 and we got 500. It was nuts. And over the course of a couple of weeks, we boiled those 500 down to 32 and then down to 8 and then 10 finalists. And we invited those finalists into, which are employees, to pitch their ideas to a judging panel of our executives and some external friendlies that we have. And then out of that, we actually ended up awarding all 8 of the teams with the opportunity to incubate their ideas. It was great. It got a lot of buzz around AEP, and it was a great event.
Tell me, Chris, do you think the biggest difference is on like sort of the company trying to get them to think about innovation, or on the top levels?
So the event was very much focused on all levels of the organization, but it was really created in order to involve everybody in innovation and to announce we're invested in it. We are going to do. We're here to invest in innovation and technology to make the future a reality.
And from that competition, Kite Works was born, which is what you are heading up now. So tell us about Kite Works and sort of the ideas that you're looking at.
Yeah, so one other thing before we move on to Kite Works, the other thing that we were able to do in parallel to the Open Innovation Challenges, we ran an accelerator here in town where we invited 10 companies, startup companies from around the world to Columbus, Ohio, to get us some exposure into the startup community and to do a little bit of tech scouting. We ended up putting several of the Spark Tank winners into the accelerator as well. So you can imagine employees that had been working their career, you know, in the normal utility industry, and then the next day, over 10 weeks, they're working side by side with startup companies to incubate their businesses. It was just a very, very cool environment for them to be in. So that happened as well. And to go back to your question about Kite Works. So we created Kite Works as a competitive entity within American Electric Power so that we could innovate faster. You mentioned at the beginning of the interview that we are a regulated company. Well, with that means that when we want to do something, we have to go to our commissions and say, this is error proof and we want to deliver it to customers and we want your approval. Well, innovation is not error proof. And in fact, innovation is error filled. And that's what we learn from those failures. I say a lot of times that we're in the business of breakthroughs. And the only way to get to the breakthrough is to fail, effort. And then eventually we get to the breakthrough. We built Kite Works that company so that we could do the ultimate validation of the things that we're building, so that we could quickly take them to customers and prove that customers are willing to hand us dollar bills for the value that we were delivering. If we were to do that under the regulated framework, it would take much, much longer and cost much, much more.
I actually love your mission statement, inspire people, delight customers. I think it's bang on, because you have to work on both sides. Can you tell us about some of the projects that you're looking at in there now? I know you can't say about everything, but some of them you're able to tell us.
Yeah, a couple of the things, and some of them are themes and some of them are exact projects. Our service territory is going through a growth with electric vehicles right now. And we wanted to test some offerings to get the infrastructure out there for electric vehicle charging. So we developed over just a couple-week period a business around electric vehicle charging, and it's a bad name. Again, we have some engineers and not marketing folks giving these things names. We called it the electric vehicle charging subscription plan. That's a mouthful. We learned from that one.
We could do better than that.
But it was a successful one, and we learned a lot. We're also working on some microgrid deployments and some distribution management software. So we work on projects that kind of span the gamut of generation, transmission, distribution.
And you're looking sort of inside AEP, you're looking also outside, you're looking to develop your own things, but you're also looking at maybe taking under your umbrella, if you like, some companies outside, correct? You're scouting as well.
Yeah, that's right. So we develop things for internal customers for our business units, and we also develop things for external facing customers as well, for them to directly procure. And you're right, one of the major strategies that my team has is technology company scouting, because we really feel like that's the fastest way to innovate. If there's a customer problem, internal or external, and a startup company that has the technology and passion to solve for that problem, it makes all the sense in the world for me to partner with that company to serve that problem instead of building the solution on our own.
And this is something that impressed me quite a lot, Chris, the fact that you guys are looking internationally. This is not something, I mean, I worked in the US for a few years. It's not my biggest in terms of knowledge, but I think I know it quite well, particularly the Californian market more. But I was impressed to see that you're going internationally, and you're kind of like, you're part of the free electron program. So what are you trying to do with this sort of international outreach, which is so new for American public utilities and utilities in general? Yeah,
we are part of the Free Electrons Accelerator, which has been awesome. Lots of good insight has come, lots of good friendships being formed with startup companies and international utilities. But to answer your question, the reason why is it's really a couple things. The technologies and business models that are happening in some parts of the world right now will become the technologies and business models that will happen in the US at some point in the future. And through this accelerator and other insight scouting that we're doing and partnerships that we're developing, we, meaning AEP and my team, we hope to accelerate our advancement within our footprint by getting that insight and bringing it home. And we want to do this again in partnership with those smaller companies and in partnership with some of those large international utilities that have this figured out. And what's been so fantastic is they're all willing to partner with us. This is not, it's not a really competitive space. We all in our hearts want to see the industry across the world advance. And it's great. It's been awesome.
I think we got to a point, right? I think most of utilities, from what I can see here in Europe, have been dragging their heels in their own areas of influence. So the Spanish utilities are very, very conservative in Spain, but then really advanced abroad. The same for all of them. But it comes to a point where everyone has realized, if I don't innovate, I'm dead. And I think this is a good time for things to change, because the change is actually happening more naturally. And to your point, some of the people that we have here with us are in the Middle East. And what I've seen interestingly in the Middle East, places like the United Arab Emirates, for example, they're having a great chance of building everything from scratch and picking and choosing, the good stuff, the stuff that is best. They're jumping over certain innovations that they didn't need, So they have actually a system that works really well. The problem is when you have previous infrastructure, because the sunk costs are so huge in our industry. That is where things go a little bit pear-shaped. In fact, I have a friend that says very often, this is just a saying, no religious anything intended, but he says, God created the world in 7 days because there was no previous infrastructure. Because if you had it, it would have taken much longer. So I think in that way, you guys maybe are following a bit behind, but also because you had the most infrastructure out of everybody else. So you had to, like this sunk costs is much harder. The inertia of the market is much harder. Anyway, this was just my comment now. So I have 2 more questions for you, and then we have like a comment from someone in the audience that's a dear friend to me as well, and someone with a lot of knowledge as well. So first, what are the technologies that most excite you in this industry for the future?
Yeah, really, it falls into one theme for me. The thing that excites me the most in any technologies or communication platforms or software that does this, I'm very, very interested in. And really that theme is any tech that allows the generation to sit as close to the load as possible, or to be optimized as close to the load as possible, is a winner in my mind. I mean, we're even seeing technologies now that in the individual IoT devices, they are managing their energy footprint. It's as we look forward, the cost of IoT devices keep going down, and the cost of communication keeps going down, and the cost of computing keeps going down. We're going to end up with the opportunity to develop an infrastructure that is really optimal. Because for the folks that are participants, if they know about the energy business, the systems are built for peak and not for optimal use. And the more technologies that we can integrate to get us to optimal use of the capital that's deployed and the capital that will be deployed in the future, it's a winner. It's a winner for me.
This is interesting. A lot of the entrepreneurs that I work with in energy and I talk to, everyone is focused, laser focused in optimization. And the IoT seems to be, the panacea. The problem is how do we get there? Because a lot of the stuff is analog in the system, but very interesting. And the last question before I just give you this comment from is just, what is your advice to younger people in the industry, maybe looking their way around? You had a hard time, it was more than 5 years of you like fighting day in, day out, seeing that there was another way and not being able. And finally, now you're in this situation where you can change things, but maybe people are in different situation, so what would be your advice to them?
I think it would totally be, if you aspire to lead change, you just got to do it. And you're going to get no answers. And you have to look at those no answers as fuel to push forward, because change is hard. And the other thing that I'll say is, and I keep this in the back of my mind all the time, and it's quoting Abraham Lincoln, but really the only way to predict the future is to create it for ourselves. And it all relies on us deciding to push forward and relentlessly doing it.
That's beautiful, and quoting also Lincoln. I have to say though, I agree with you. I think that we often forget sometimes, because every day you don't see huge things happening. So you kind of forget how, step by step, we're kind of like teasing away and actually managing to get to the future and go in that direction. And the interesting thing about this time, Chris, I think I agree with you, is that it is all going into a direction in which everyone can shape it, and it's not just the government, which is something that is very different from what's before. And this is more so, I'm not even talking just about the US, I'm talking about everywhere. This is less government work and more, just the electric vehicles is going to change everything. So it's going to be awesome. And I have here Eric. Eric is an old friend of mine. He worked for Foster Wheeler for many, many years. He actually was the director general here in Spain. And he says, I worked at 3 separate AEP plants in the 1970s and into the 80s. The innovation efforts sound interesting and important. So awesome, someone that also worked with AEP. And thank you, Eric, for being such a big supporter also of these things. And thank you very much, Chris, for your help, for your time. It's been amazing getting to know you. I think that is incredible what you're doing now in AEP. And I think that, or I hope, that this changes the future of utilities going forward. So keep working at it. And I thank you very much, guys, for being here today, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.